Hello, I'm Brigantia, Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to Divination Meditation. Now, if you watched this channel during 2021, you'll know that I did Divination Demonstration, in which I would pick out a tarot spread, lay out the cards, talk a little bit about the interpretation, and just walk everyone through the thought process of what you might go through as you're interpreting the cards, whether for yourself or for someone else who asked you for a reading. For divination meditation, we're taking a slightly different tack. This is less about getting clues about, the future or the overall goings on. This is more so about focusing on specific concepts and giving your divination tools an opportunity to just tell you what they think you need to know at this moment, what you need to focus on, something to contemplate, and it's an opportunity for a little bit more self-work, and especially as we're starting in the month of January, it is a time of reflection, and so I imagine that most of us are doing self-work of one kind or another. So in aid of this, we're going to compare a tarot card, an ogham, and a rune, and we'll just kind of see what they have in common, see where they have some differences, and just try to take a glance at what we could possibly glean from this. Another word for this particular process would be comparative divination. So let's jump into it. But for the tarot, I want to briefly point out the deck that I'm using because it was a Christmas present to me for this year from my aunt. So if you're watching this, thank you, Aunt Stacy. It is the Cat Tarot, written by Julie Samili and illustrated by Megan Lynn Cott. It's adorable, cute, whimsical, and it's just so much fun. We actually might be using this all through 2022, but we'll have to see. Now we're ready to begin. So our card is the Queen of Wands, representing warmth, rulership, ambition, creativity, and vibrancy. And you see our darling little kitty, who's obviously the queen, resting in front of her fireplace. We've got a little decorative lion over there. I think it's the handle to the fireplace over there. And everything's just well and warm and wonderful and perfect for this particular cat and this particular queen. And so the idea is that all is right in your world, you're in control, you're centered, you're where you need to be, you're getting your needs met, you're getting a lot of your wants met, so you can start to dream. What do you want to do? How will you get there? And then making plans to go forth with that with full gusto. That's essentially the essence of this particular card. Now for our ogham, which if you think it began life as a humble craft store popsicle stick, you would be correct. But needs must, and there's no shame in doing something that's simple and homemade. This particular ogham is Ngetal, meaning reed. It's about upset and surprises, harmony and inner development. So this too draws upon that energy of creativity, of what could possibly happen. Where do you want to go? Where do you need to go? Then for our rune, we have Fehu, representing possessions, beginnings, and wealth. And this again touches on the idea of creativity, because how do you get possessions or wealth? Well, it's because you worked and you were rewarded for that work. Your work produced something, whether it was a tidy filing cabinet or you built someone a house. Either way, you have created something and then you got the rewards from that creation. And that's what Fehu is really all about. So all of these things have to do with creativity. And that's very appropriate for this time of year because we are in creative mode. We are in reflective mode. We're getting a chance to kind of absorb the year that we just had and think about, there are certain things I would like to carry on. There are certain things I would like to continue to develop. And there are other things I would like to set down and not do anymore. Or things I would like to correct, behaviors I want to improve. This is a time of ambition and goals and getting kind of stripping ourselves back to the bare bones, getting rid of distractions, and just focusing on what we consider to be truly important. And that does go in with the idea of creativity, because in order to know what we want and where we want to go, well, we have to be able to envision that. We have to be able to have enough imagination to be able to think of how things could be different from how they are now, and different in a good way. Because if we have something in our lives that's already good, well, obviously we're not wanting to change that because it's as it ought to be. But areas in which we feel a kind of restless discontent, or we're wanting to stretch or push ourselves, or just try and become and develop into something more. That's what the essence of true creativity is, and that's what I get from all three of these divination tools. Now, with the tarot, I see much more of the idea of self-ownership, of you have agency. It is up to you whether you accomplish something or accomplish nothing. It is the result and consequences of the choices that you made. It's not really giving me any idea that there are outside influences to be contending with. This is more so worry about what you're going to do. Other people, they're going to do what they're going to do. Just worry about what you're going to do. Worry about finding your own pathway forward and focusing on that. It's about remembering who wears the crown in our lives. This goes into ideas of self-sovereignty. And if that's something that we perhaps struggle with, there are many gods and goddesses who are associated with sovereignty and rulership and self-determination. And reading up on their mythologies and thinking about what they went through in their particular stories, how they exercised their sovereignty, what they chose to do, ways in which they were proactive, ways in which they shaped events and what was going on around them. That can give us some much needed inspiration to move forward in our own lives. Now, when it comes to the ogham with Ngetal, the idea of the upsets and surprises, well, I mean, that's just, the nature of reality. We don't always know what lies behind that bend in the road. We can't quite see the direction that it's going. We know it's there, and we know there's something that lies after that. We just don't know what. And the same is true as we're seeking our own goals going forward in the year. I mean, there are things that we can have a pretty reasonable idea that there's a high probability that they're going to go in a certain direction, but there's all kinds of details that we don't know yet. Not everything has been written. Not everything is set in stone. And sometimes things just occur. Now, are we going to allow ourselves to be stopped by every little obstacle that happens to come our way, or are we just going to, deal with it and then continue on developing along our own path? That really is the nature of the challenge, and it requires fortitude, it requires determination, and it requires not wallowing in our emotions and allowing our emotions to overpower us to the extent that we stop what we're doing and we stagnate. This doesn't mean that we suppress our feelings, or that we don't feel our feelings, or that we don't view our feelings as important. But it does mean of keeping our feelings in their proper place, of understanding, if I let this overtake me now, it's really going to set me back. I need to find a way to go forward as I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing, and just not allowing it to be the thing that stops me. And learning to keep our emotions in check. For one, that is a complete departure from the general flow of society's going in at this particular moment. But it's also displaying leadership, even if we're only leading ourselves, of saying, you know what, I don't want to go off the same cliff that the crowd is going on. I saw that there was actually a bridge just a little further up the road, so maybe I could cross the chasm that way rather than tipping over the cliff and just, fingers crossed, maybe the fall won't get me. It's making decisions for ourselves, and again, taking on that ownership, and understanding that it's for us to be responsible for ourselves, not waiting for someone else to lead us. Taking on that role of leading ourselves and not making excuses for ourselves. That's another big thing. And it's also part of the process of maturation, which, I'm sorry to say, there's a lot of ideologies that have been really embraced and clung to, and it actively prevents people from pursuing the natural maturation process, because those ideologies are essentially about with authoritarianism. And if someone is going to have authority, they have to have people to have authority over. And that means people yielding their power, yielding their autonomy, yielding their own personal authority over their lives over to someone else. It is about surrendering. And you can't get people to surrender if they don't feel vulnerable. So cultivating vulnerability, making them feel as though they are too incompetent to live their own lives, that all feeds into ceding that power. So by reclaiming our power and saying, I'm going to do what I am going to do. I am going to be the person who decides the course of my life. It's not a small thing. You're bucking a huge trend, and it's not like there's not going to be opposition. But what I will say is that ultimately it will be worth it, especially if you're a practitioner of the craft. you just can't afford to be the person who's going along with the crowd and doing as you're told, or putting yourself, at the mercy and at the service of any one human entity, because you have obligations and responsibilities that go beyond the seen human realm. And we know that our actions have consequences, especially our magical actions. So we need to make sure that we are the ones who are retaining our control and our own power, and that we haven't ceded that to someone else. Now, last with the rune, about the possessions, the beginnings, and wealth. I would like to focus a little bit on the theme of beginnings, because we are at a beginning. We are in a new year. We are in a new cycle, because we just came out of Yule. The sun has just been reborn. It's starting to gain strength, and the further we get along in the month, the more we're going to start seeing that lengthening of the days and that potential for warmth, that potential for new growth in due course as the seasons continue to turn. We ourselves can view our own inner beings in that way. We were in this kind of winter, and now we have an opportunity to start moving out of it. But that can't happen if we haven't decided that we are, in fact, in charge of ourselves. So that's something to definitely be keeping in mind with this. The idea of, who is wearing the crown, who is responsible for our own development, and realizing it's that person who looks at us in the mirror every single day. I mean, that's not to say we can't have mentors. It doesn't mean that people can't inspire us, or that we shouldn't seek out guidance when we need it. But ultimately, taking the steps and doing the work, that's always going to be up to us. Just like breathing. No one can breathe for us. No one can actually spiritually develop for us. There are things we simply have to do for ourselves. And it wouldn't be right for someone else to do it for us. That's another thing. And lastly, I want to focus on the idea of wealth with this particular rune. Wealth isn't just about what we physically have. It's about our wealth of knowledge. It's about our wealth of experience. It's about our wealth of character. And these are intangible things. Often there are tangible results from that, but these are intangible qualities. Now, we don't necessarily see it manifesting in the physical world right away. But I think if we are not developing that within ourselves, especially over the long term, and we discover we don't really have anything to show for it, then it's time to go back to the mirror and think about, okay, what am I doing? I thought I was creating, I thought I was pursuing my goals, I thought I was doing all this, but I don't have anything to show for that effort. Where is the result? Where is that wealth? Where is the payoff? And it may be that it's still cooking. It will, and we'll be able to get that in due course. Or it might be that we think we're putting forth more effort than we actually are. Maybe we are scattering our energies in too many different directions. Maybe there are things we need to give up if we're going to achieve something that is of greater importance to us. Or maybe there is a roadblock that isn't more psychological. Maybe it is a little bit more real. And not to say that psychological roadblocks aren't real, but roadblocks that are outside of ourselves, they're not something we can just will ourselves out of. We can't just talk ourselves out of that. That requires different tactics. So we need to take an honest look about what's going on, not to excuse or accuse ourselves, but simply to see what is, and to make any necessary adjustments, because no one wants to throw effort away. No one wants to feel that, they're just existing day by day and, taking up space and nothing much else is being accomplished. I mean, you want to talk about a road to depression on top of the winter blues that I'm sure, if you haven't set in already for some people, that as January and February goes on, we will certainly be experiencing that. No one wants to be in those shoes. No one wants to be in that situation. So doing a little mental check-in on our progress, I think that is probably going to be very helpful. And we should be able to expect, benchmarks of progress. We should be able to point to our progress. We should be able to say that I did this and now it has made that kind of difference, and be able to define it at the very least, and hopefully have it show in our behavior, in our general overall mental state, and also for whether or not we're able to fulfill our own spiritual responsibilities. And this, of course, I'm directing more so to witches, particularly those of us who are Wiccans, because that isn't just the practice of magic, that is also taking on the form of priesthood. Are we actually discharging those duties? Even though we may not have a coven, we are still essentially at the service of fellow pagans. Are we making ourselves available? And if someone calls upon us for that, do we have anything useful to give them? So I think we've only begun to scratch the surface on where we could go with this particular meditation. And it certainly won't be our last for this year. We'll be doing one on a weekly basis and see where this takes us. And so I hope you'll turn in for the next one. And of course, if you have any other thoughts that have just kind of sparked through this discussion, or you were looking at the tarot or the ogham or the rune, and some thought occurred to you, please share that either at Blackbird's Brew or the Discord group, which you can join by clicking on the link in the description below, or by commenting on this video, whichever one you prefer. But in the meantime, I think that's enough rambling for me for the moment. So please subscribe, like the video, and I will see you in the next one.